Hey there, welcome to episode 20 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. I am recording this at nearly 11:30 p.m., Tuesday, March 26, 2024, in mildly chilly Las Vegas. Episode 20 already, amazing. Not named for the movie entirely, although that is relevant, but for my travels and travails while working for the Intel Corporation, actually Intel Americas, after I moved to Las Vegas 10 years ago. Just like the movie, though, not quite so much travel and not quite so much time and distance as was covered by the movie character Ryan Bingham, played by George Clooney. But I did travel quite a bit while working for Intel Americas. That's a finer point. It was an Intel Corporation thing. I traveled quite a bit. I was on 100 or more airplanes each year. I would do it all again. And I look forward to returning to the friendly skies, ideally via Airbus airframes. That was funnier when I wrote it, although it's not funny. I do have to say, for all of my travels, I never encountered, the worst thing I encountered was an overfuel situation. They had miscalculated the amount of fuel to put on. They overfilled the tanks by quite a bit, and it was a small aircraft for a short hop, and you could very clearly and kind of, well, it wasn't that bad, but you could very clearly smell jet fuel. So they had to vent and remove some of the fuel, so we departed late. Other than that, most of my mishaps were around missed flights due to late flights and so on. So pretty uneventful travels, and I would do it again, but not on some of the Boeing aircraft that are overhead right now. Checking out the links wherever you found this audio program. Don't forget, wherever you did find this audio program, hopefully they have the episode description, which has these links. If not, I'm going to start announcing. In fact, I should put this in there. I'll put it in the links as well. The place to find the authoritative episodes, the primary point of publication for all of my audio programs, will be at the associated website. So I do own quagglingsand.com. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But for now, if you visit that link and it doesn't go anywhere, stay tuned. But I will update all of the published episode details with that link. So the episodes will still appear in the secondary location, Spotify, etc. Easier to find, hopefully. Buymeacoffee.com, Dan Hugo. You can find links as I've described. You can find the secondary links for the various programs I produce. You can support my efforts if you want. You can literally buy me a coffee. All of my projects are powered by coffee. You are under no obligation to buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo profile page. And it's unrelated third cousin, ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo, are third-party tools I can use to engage my listening public as I do more stuff. There will be some, hopefully, fingers crossed, some stuff to talk about with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation project, My Muni, for example. So look for that stuff there. There are 2 movies, 2 IMDb pages, profiles for 2 movies I have linked to as well, Up in the Air and Big Fish. Those are the links for this episode. So I got a new job back then. I had just moved to Las Vegas after a house fire. It was an interesting time. A former colleague from Palm had started working in the mobile computing group at Intel. He contacted me and said, hey, I'm going to be in Vegas for CES 2014. And I'm looking for someone who would be willing to travel, someone technical but who can speak to people. So we met for Thai food at, where did we meet? I can't remember the name of the place. It's a very well-known place and totally spaced on it. It'll come to me. So we met for lunch. I hadn't seen Larry in several years, probably since about 2012, I think. 2010, 11. Not tremendous amounts of time, but a couple of years. So we had lunch, and I immediately started coming up with some names, some possible people that he could contact. And he said, oh, I was thinking you could do it. And I said, oh, that would be interesting. All that travel, which I hadn't traveled in a while. So it was a little, it was a tenuous possibility at the moment when he first suggested it. And I said, would I have to move back to California? And he said, well, probably. And I said, because I just moved to here to Las Vegas. I had lived here by the time he was here in January of 2014. I had moved here in August of 2013. So just about 4 months. I said, I just got here. California's a little weird. He said, well, you are going to be traveling a lot. I guess it doesn't matter where you live. And I said, well, if I could stay here, that'd be great. And he said, if you move back to California, you get the geo bump. And I said, I think if I stay here, I also get the geo bump. So cost of living difference being what it was. So we agreed. I eventually worked with HR. They formed a company in Nevada. There was no Intel presence in Nevada. So they formed Intel America's office and Intel America's office in Nevada. So they had to form a corporation or some entity. I don't remember if I ever looked it up, but they had to form a corporation here so they could pay me. I don't know if it was an LLC or whatever it was. So technically not Intel Corporation, but of course like a subsidiary or something for the purposes of payroll. Otherwise, I was based in Nevada, the only Intel employee at the time. And my manager was based in Santa Clara. The rest of our team was based in San Diego, California. And so began my adventures with the Intel Maker Innovator Group. Since I'd be traveling so much and remain in Vegas, all of my travel was going to be from Nevada, and that worked out okay. And I was to be a software architect and technical liaison. So I was the nerdy interface to our maker community and between our maker community and our labs and so on. So I would work on the products in the Intel labs in Leixlip, Ireland, Toulouse, France, and Hillsboro, Oregon. And I would also attend maker fairs, hackathons, and just be out and about. And I spoke to several people at Intel contemporaneously, and they were all somewhat jealous. This was unheard of, to be a product development engineer, but also speak directly to your customers. Normally at a company like Intel, there's several layers, multiple empires built by various management fiefdoms. And so we had the, what was it called? I'm totally spacing on these things. It'll come to me. Something device, something group or whatever. They would hold hackathons, IoT hackathons for Intel, and they would create projects and challenges of sorts and whatnot. But they had no actual contact with product development. So I was the only person from the product development team in Maker Innovator Group that would participate proactively at their events. So I always knew from hands-on development how things really worked. And so they were happy to have me join in. And it was invaluable to spend that time with you should always talk to your customers. And if you're the person making the thing, and if you can talk to your customers who are using the thing without an interposer, there's more to these various stories. But basically, their KPI, their key performance indicators, did not include reporting field failures to our group. So if they found one of our devices, in this case the Edison, which they were using quite a bit, if they found an Edison was having problems, they would just throw it away and replace it for the person who found the problem. Get on with your hackathon participation, problem solved. And I said, that doesn't help anybody. And they said, well, it's not in our KPIs. So things like that were interesting. So it was ultimately, I will say, invaluable for me to do all this traveling and to participate in all these events, while at the same time participating in the labs of Intel in various places, working on the product. So it was actually, it was very educational, very valuable. And as a little bonus, I got to travel around quite a bit and meet a lot of really smart people. So my first day was in February of 2014. I want to say it was like February 19th, maybe. Did I drive? Yeah, I drove to the Bay Area and attended my NEO, my new employee orientation. Everything at Intel is acronym or some sort of a funny little phrase. Attended my work week, first work week there, my Neo. And as it happens, fun fact, the camera was broken for badge photo. But this being Intel and my having worked for them as a contractor in, when was that? 2003, maybe, in Chandler, Arizona. I said, hey, I used to work for Intel as a contractor. Do you still have my picture? And she said, oh yeah, here it is. So they pulled up my picture and printed it on my badge, on my employee badge. So it was a white badge. I think they were green for contractors. So printed my photo. Now here's the funny part, something that didn't always occur to people immediately. It was 2014 and they printed the picture of me from 2003 on my badge. So even though I was a brand new employee, it looked like I'd been working there for, a decade. So fun times. What was I going to say? The trip to the Bay Area was interesting. I got to meet everybody, see what's going on. And then shortly after, so this was in February, shortly after, I want to say about 2 weeks later, I visited San Diego, also driving. So I drove from Las Vegas to San Diego because I figured, they're like, why don't you just fly? And I said, well, I'm going to be doing a lot of flying. So I think I'll just have one last road trip. And I was not wrong. So I drove to San Diego, met the San Diego team, drove back home, and then within a month, I want to say, end of later in March. It was after St. Patty's Day. I know that. I did visit Ireland during St. Patty's Day, I think the following year. But for my first visit to Ireland, it was after St. Patty's. So I booked a one-way ticket. They said, go to Ireland. We need you to patch up our relationship with our Irish team. And that is a totally different story for another episode entirely, I think. I would love to have Adrian on, talk about the old days. Adrian from the Irish team. So he was one of the very cool people I met there. Many cool people in Ireland. Booked my one-way ticket on Aer Lingus, obviously knowing what I would come to know shortly after. Don't book one-way flights. But I booked a one-way ticket because they literally said, we don't know when you're coming back. We don't know how long you need to stay and so on. So I flew to Ireland because of ended up staying there for 5 weeks. Because of the time of year, because of whatever else was going on, it was tricky to find places to stay. My first stop was a golf castle in Maynooth, which is down the street from Leixlip, which is where Intel Ireland is based. Intel in Dublin, in Leixlip, of course. There's also Intel Shannon. I never visited there. I was close, but I never got up there. So stayed in the golf castle for like 2 weeks. Met some lads from Northern Ireland, Belfast. And they said, what are you staying here for if you're not playing golf? I said, that's a good question. But I worked right down the street, so I would walk to the Intel site. Took a taxi a couple times, but it was pretty much walking distance. I could also jump on the train from the Maynooth station, and if you want to look it up, it's Maynooth. It ends with a TH, but Maynooth. Would get on the train, take the train into Dublin at the Connolly station, wander around a bit. So I did that the first weekend I was there. Had no idea where I was. Had to figure out how to get a cell phone that would work. This is before I had Google Fi, so I ended up getting a 3-SIM. I used to get SIMs for different countries. Google Fi was much more convenient. But I got my SIM, so wandering around Dublin without any idea where I was, not using Google Maps, it was probably more interesting. I happened upon the Celtic whiskey shop. I walked into there and I said, because I just wanted to see what they had. That's kind of cool. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll get something before I leave several weeks later. But if you were going to go to a pub right now, where would you go? And he said, I'd go to the Duke. It's 2 down on your left. So I walked 2 blocks down. So Celtic Whiskey Shop is on Dawson, and the Duke is on a street called Duke, I think, if I remember correctly, that runs perpendicular to Dawson and Grafton. So I walked down to the Duke, walked in, came upon Ian and the rest of my 5-week stay was spent substantially at the Duke. Good times. Quite a regular spot to hang out, although I would go also to 37 Dawson, to Cafe and Sign, several other spots all along that whole area. Stevens Green, the list goes on. Trinity, all manner of sights to see and places to visit in Dublin. But absolutely, if I were to choose my home base of operations in Dublin, it would certainly be the Duke. So that was Dublin part one. I spent 5 weeks. So I had to leave the golf castle place after 2 weeks. So I stayed another week, I think. Where was it? At it was a Clarion something, and I stayed. There was nothing around this hotel. I gotta look it up one of these days. There was one restaurant called the Lemongrass. There was the hotel, which had a gym and a swimming pool, so people would use that as a gym. I could walk down to the freeway, to the highway, whatever, M something, I can't remember. You jump on the 66 bus. No, 66 went to Dublin, which there was a bus that would go to Leixlip, so I could catch a bus to go to work. Catching the train was not going to work from that spot, so I would jump on the bus. I had my Leap card. I was totally into the Dublin scene, so I was commuting, walking everywhere, taking the bus, taking the train. I think I took one taxi from the airport that first day, but once I figured out how to get around, piece of cake. So I would take the bus, and on the weekend, the first weekend there, I had to go recharge I had to top off my Leap card. And as well, I figured, let me see what's up the street there. They had some shops and a shopping mall. So I went to the shopping mall, and they had a newsagent there, so I could top off my card. And then I went upstairs and happened upon the most amazing coffee shop I had ever witnessed. Cafe Free, Cafe, C-A-F-E, Free, F-R-E-I, a Hungarian coffee shop company with, in fact, I'm going to add that to the, let me type that in the links here. It's worth looking at, Cafe Free. So I'll link to the main site. They only have locations now in Dubai, I think France, Hungary, of course, a couple of other spots. The one in Dublin became a normal sandwich shop on my third visit to Dublin, so that was quite a disappointment. But not on the third visit to Dublin. My first 2 visits to Dublin, this first one, and then later my second one. Excellent shop. You could get coffees from around the world, prepared in traditional styles. So I got a Turkish coffee, an Arabic coffee. I got a Nicaraguan tobacco coffee, a couple of different ones. So really amazing happenstance. I would not have happened upon this place, nor even known of its existence, had I not been able to stay at the golf castle place. I'll try to find links if I can update the links thing. And then I cannot remember so after my 2 weeks, was it a week? 2 weeks? I think I stayed a week in Minute, maybe week and a half. Anyway, my third, I had to change yet again. So my third and final place to stay was a sort of a bed and breakfast in Dublin proper. So I was in Dublin. I was right around the corner from Connolly Station. So I could walk to the station, get on a train, shoot over to work. So the train that I had taken from Minute to go to downtown to Dublin to Connolly Station, now I was taking the train from Connolly Station to a stop that was maybe 2 kilometers from Intel. Now, if I got the early train, if I would get there like 7 a.m., there was a shuttle bus that would run from the train station to the Intel site. However, I was getting there at like 8:30 in the morning. Too bad for me. So I would walk. So I had to walk to the train station, walk to Intel, flip that around the other way when I would leave. There was never a shuttle running in the evening, so I'd walk to the bus. I'd walk to the train, take the train back to Connolly Station. So once I was downtown, so I had visited the Duke, of course, and I made several trips to the Duke, take the bus. Now I'm staying literally on the other side of the Liffey. So I'd cross the river, visit the Duke. Every once in a while, somebody would walk me back, or Kieran would give me a ride back to the hotel. And that would happen through my many stays there. So I don't even remember which time which thing happened, but I would get a walk back from someone who worked there, or, depending on what time it was and so on. So good times. I cannot for the life of me remember what the place was called. So I'll try to figure that out. So I'll try to add the golf castle, the hotel down the street from the mall, and the bed and breakfast place. In my future stays, I would try to stay at the North Star, which is gone. Or no, it got renamed. It's something else now. So the North Star, I could literally look out my window to the Connolly station. So I would walk right across the street, get on the train, go to work. And then I was in Dublin rather than being in Maynooth. Nothing wrong with Maynooth, but hey, if you're going to be visiting Dublin, you might as well be visiting Dublin, right? So after work, shoot downtown, hang out at 37, the Duke. Cafe and Sign was cool. Super pub, very, very interesting idea. I would like to see a super pub here. So that was that. I would travel all over the place. Eventually I would go to Intel France. I would stay in Toulouse, and I would visit our Intel Edison team. The Intel Edison team was part of MCG, Mobile Computing Group. So they took a cell phone focused, what was it called? Totally spacing on the names. Some dual core, totally spacing on it. Will it come to me? Anyway, a dual core mobile phone Intel part, x86 part. And they reduced the clock speeds, they reduced the total power requirements, and made it so there was no need for a big heat sink or anything like that. So it was essentially a mobile phone part. Put it in on this little, it was a little module, so a system on module basically, that you could then attach to a larger carrier board that made it Arduino compatible. Pretty cool thing. So before we launched it, I went to the Toulouse team, met with them. They were just finalizing the release, so I helped go through how are people going to use this in the maker space, right? Now Intel suffered, probably still does, from problems with documentation. So making a product that's usable by a 10-year-old, younger, older maker who probably is familiar with an Arduino and might be looking forward to playing with an Arduino compatible Intel Edison. Making that possible with the minimum of fuss was something I would learn at every turn that we did not do correctly at every hackathon I participated in. So good times. I was in Toulouse. I was in downtown Toulouse, I guess, and I would jump on a light rail. So I would leave my hotel, walk to the light rail station, get on a light rail, and shoot out to where the Intel site was. And it was very near where an Airbus site was and some other spots. So sort of in the business park section of town. Actually, this was interesting. It was Google had just enabled some sort of translation services with the camera on the phone, and I got a France Telecom SIM or something. So I was fully connected. I could catch a bus to the light rail station, or I could walk to the light rail station and head back downtown. But I was able to use my phone to look at the maps and the other information that was posted at bus stops and elsewhere. So I was actually able to figure out where I was and what was going on. So I'd come a long way, and using technology to my advantage, I would return to my hotel after work. And then one day, I was there for maybe 2 days. I said, hey, where am I going to go? So I walked out the front of the Crown Plaza where I was staying, and I picked a direction. I think I went to the right. I just started walking. I eventually, and one of my favorite things about all of the European cities and areas that I was ever visiting was just that, it's not a grid system. The streets are a little bit wandering. It's a little bit older. So I wandered around through the streets of Toulouse, having just picked a direction. I'll just go to the right. Eventually found myself on Avenue Victor Hugo, which I think anyone anywhere in France will do so eventually. And there before me, the flags of Ireland waving at the Melting Pot Pub. I figured that's got to be the place. So I walked over there, went in, met Veronica, the bartender, started talking about all manner of things. And I would run into Veronica a couple times, and I almost ran into her in Dubai when she was working for, what is the airline in Dubai? Air Emirates. Thank you. So she was a flight attendant on Air Emirates for a while, and I believe now she's married, kids, Australia, I think. So good for her. But anyway, so got to know various people at this pub, and later in another visit to Toulouse, I would stay at a hotel that was like next door to this pub, but it was next door such that it was between the Melting Pot and their sister pub, the Thirsty Monk. Fun fact. So Intel France was very interesting. Met lots of cool people. Got to see some of the politics, some of the differences between the mobile computing group and the Maker Innovator group, which had sort of broken away from. So MIG was formerly in MCG, now is separate. I also attended Maker Faire Rome. I would actually attend Maker Faire Rome, New York, which is in Queens, and the original, the home base of Maker Faire in San Mateo, so several times. I also attended Maker Faire Washington, D.C. That was my final Intel flagged, as in I was my final as an employee of Intel. That was pretty fun, actually. But Maker Faire Rome was for the launch of the Edison. The Galileo had launched the previous year, and Maker Faire Rome, where they launched the Galileo, was just before I joined the company. So we launched the Edison at the Intel Developer Conference, IDC, in San Francisco. I jumped on a plane, caught the red eye to Pennsylvania for PennApps 10. And that was the first hackathon we ever had with the Edison, which had literally the glue on the boxes was still drying. So brand new, went to this hackathon, and then whenever Maker Faire Rome was, that was our formal launch in Europe with Arduino. So I met Massimo and the whole team. And the launch of the Edison, got to see the lay of the land, the whole... fun fact, there are more maker spaces, and there's just a generally more established maker ethos and maker culture, innovation culture in Italy. There are more of these per capita, more spaces and so on than most places in the U.S. So Italy knows their maker scene, to be sure. It was interesting when Massimo was announcing the product on stage. We were in a big kind of a lecture hall, theater setting, and given the crowd and so on, he drew quite a crowd, Massimo Bonzi, and it was very clear. And I, with all due respect, but I made this comment, which I believe is accurate, given that the Vatican is not far from where we were. One evening we walked by the Vatican. We could see, we didn't really, it was late at night, so we didn't go wandering around causing trouble, but poking around the place. But I had commented that I believed that if Massimo Bonzi were presenting in front of any crowd, anywhere, but in particular this crowd that day, were he in the middle of that presentation and His Holiness the Pope walked in, I believe the Pope would be asked to give Massimo a moment to continue and complete his presentation. That's how important this stuff is there. I could be wrong. No disrespect. But that is what Italy is like in general. I would attend many, many hackathons in my travels. I would travel around the U.S., mostly domestic travel, more than half, certainly. I was on more than 100 airplanes each year. Probably the baseline was 3 hackathons per month, sometimes 4. So I was gone a lot. The typical travel, I would head to McCarran, which is now Harry S. Reid Airport, probably on Thursday, get there for Friday, and I would do the thing. I would usually stay awake the whole time, which was grueling, and then I would come back on Monday. Never, ever try to leave or return to Vegas on a Sunday evening. So fly back Monday. Same with departing. Don't even try on Friday. Do it on Thursday. So that was my week. Every week was either going to a hackathon or several times I would go to Toulouse. I would go to Ireland. I would go to somewhere in Europe. So I'd be gone for a couple weeks here and there. So generally speaking, about 3 hackathons per month, sometimes 4, probably 5 a couple of times if there were 5 weeks in a month. So I did that quite a bit. It was fun being a part-time resident of Las Vegas. I would very much like to do that again. And the rest of the time spent either up in the air or at some destination. I would try to visit Intel in Leixlip whenever possible. I spent more time of all the Intel sites that I visited, Toulouse, Hillsboro, Oregon, San Diego, Santa Clara, and of course Ireland. Spent more time in IR5 than any other Intel facility or anywhere for that matter in the world. So I was quite fond of the Irish, the lads, and it was mostly lads, unfortunately. Although I did work with my first time there for my 5 weeks, I spent the first 3 or so sitting behind Grenier Miller, and she was very helpful. I lost my voice, as I'm wont to do probably now. Lost my voice. I actually, as I would learn, when I departed Vegas, it was in the middle of the Vegas croup, the windy, dusty, everybody gets something part of the year. You either got your runny eyes, you got your cough, whatever. So I got the cough, coughing up a storm. And they said, "Do you have pneumonia?" I said, "No, I just have this cough. Whatever I got from Vegas, it's still irritating me." And as it happens, Grenier got pneumonia. So that was weird. But no, I did not have pneumonia. It was some non-trivial reaction to whatever's in the dust here. I get allergic responses every year, and right around now. So we got the wind, we got the dust kicked up, and who knows what is going on. But anyway, so I lost my voice there, and at some point she said, "Dan, have you been out to the pubs?" I said, "Yes, I do visit the pubs in the evenings." And she said, "Were you out there singing?" And of course I didn't have a voice, so I was like, no. But in fact, it was funny because I not only was out to the pubs, but I had taken the X-Link buses. So these are the 66X, for example, that ran through the night, late night routes. So I could get back to my hotel, the Clarion, wherever that was. So she said, "Dan, you're taking the X. You're out to the pubs all night." And I said, "Oh, and I did my laundry in a laundromat." "Oh, you're more Irish than we are." So that was endearing. So, but mostly the lads of Intel, the people I was working with day to day. So that was fun. I would try to visit Leixlip whenever I could. So here's the fun part. When you travel through Europe and you're heading back to America, you can go, and I think this is still true. I think they reinstated it after the pandemic. If not, I hope they do. I haven't checked, but you could literally go through customs in the Dublin airport before entering America. As you may know, America is a point of entry customs check country. When you enter Europe, it's point of destination. So if you're flying in through Dublin, but you're going to Toulouse, they'll check you through customs in Toulouse. But if you're flying to America, if you're flying through Newark or LaGuardia, and probably Newark for my, got a lot of United miles. So flying through Newark, you're going to go through customs in Newark, then you're going to get on your other connection to Las Vegas. You could probably on another airline fly straight through, nonstop to Vegas. I'm sure somebody was offering that flight. Turns out the Las Vegas airport is not bad for getting flights, and you'll often get better prices. On one occasion, I was in New Jersey or New York somewhere. It was cheaper for me to fly home, and it was Intel's dime, so this was really an experiment. It was cheaper for me to fly home on United, so fly from Newark to Las Vegas, go do some laundry, pack my bags, get back to the airport, get back on a plane, fly back to Newark, and then on to Vegas. On to Dublin. I think it was probably Dublin, but somewhere in Europe. So it was cheaper to do that than to fly directly from where I already was in New Jersey or New York, jump on a plane in Newark airport, fly to Dublin or wherever I was going. So very strange, but that's the nature of air travel, or it was at the time. So anyway, I could fly through Dublin, go through customs, and it made traveling easier. So since I was always booking my own travel, this was crazy how this always worked out this way. But anytime I found myself in Europe, I would somehow fly through Dublin on Monday after arriving on Friday so I could head back to Vegas. Are you picking up what I'm putting down there? So I visited Dublin many, many times. Always good times. Several times for longer than a weekend, but I would always try to end my visits to anywhere in Europe with a visit to Dublin and a stay somewhere, not always at the North Star, but the North Star was a great spot if I had to jump on the train at Connolly. Good times. By the way, if you're ever going to get a coffee at the train station at Connolly Station, try to have small, and this is true anywhere in Europe, try not to hand them like a €50 note, which I did not do, but I was there when it happened. And if you've ever had an espresso in the morning that has a crema of contempt on top, it's when you take all of the change when they're just opening in the morning. Yipes. Don't do that. It wasn't me. It was my colleague from Italy. He knows who he is, and I'm not even going to say. So I would visit not only Leixlip and Toulouse. I was at Toulouse a couple times, Leixlip many times, but I would also visit Hillsborough. I would visit the Santa Clara office now and then I would visit the San Diego office as little as possible. I didn't really care for especially one of the people there. Generally speaking, the San Diego office was a little weird in general, but just be the way it was. But there was one person there, very caustic, very awful, would later be escorted out of the building after threatening his manager. So yeah, I think I read those tea leaves correctly. But I spent more time in Ireland at the Intel site than anywhere else. And it was strange because as an employee, I was gone for more, like 80% of the time. And as the only Intel employee in Nevada, so now if I were based in Hillsborough, for example, specifically, in Hillsborough, Oregon, which is essentially the home base of Intel, started in Santa Clara, but Hillsborough is the home of Intel. When you're in Hillsborough, Oregon, the chances that you are sitting next to someone or near someone from Intel are like 98%. When I was working for Intel and I was home for the weekend, my weekends being, Monday evening, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. So middle of the week, my neighborhood contained exactly one or fewer Intel employees. I used to tell people I could sit anywhere, anytime in Nevada, especially in the Vegas area, and shout code names and confidential details of anything that I was working on or anything I knew about or anything. Nobody would care. So it was kind of an interesting mode. As well, the person who hired me for my first job out of college in 1993, Supermac Technologies, he knew all too well, although I was laid off from that first job, he knew all too well that I like to, when I get bored or frustrated with an employer, it was easy at the time through the years to find new jobs. So when I was at Intel, for the longest I had ever worked at any company, he said, wow, I'm impressed that you're still there. And I said, the only reason I'm still at Intel is that I don't have to be at Intel. So the remote work situation before the pandemic, long before, was proven to me to be not only effective, but also preferred for me. So yeah, I would try to visit the Intel site more than anywhere else, which I managed to accomplish. I attended Maker Fairs. I mentioned I went to the big three and some smaller events. I visited the Officine Arduino in Turin, Italy. That was funny. We had an arrangement. We had a business partnership with Arduino. When I arrived, I was speaking with Federico Vanzati, and I said, hey, has anyone from Intel been here? He said, no, you're the first. And I thought that was odd. I stayed there. I went Thanksgiving to make sure that my colleagues would not go during Thanksgiving. So I was there for a whole week before any of my manager and other business people were flying in. So we all met up there and we designed the Arduino 101, which would later appear in our reality show. So I had a whole week to hang out. I had the team at Arduino have a box opening experience with our Edison product. All of them found it as frustrating as I had encountered at every single hackathon. So every single time I worked with anyone trying to get anyone with any skill level to use the Edison, they always encountered a frustrating, approximately 60 to 90 minute crank turning, as in turn the crank like a machine. Like you just had to do all these things. It took forever. I worked through a workflow. Kind of reminded me of Apollo 13 when Kevin Spacey's character is working through the restart procedure for the command module. So I'm like, if you do these things in parallel, and if you do this and you have that, when you're downloading this, you can do that, and you plug this in. So I got it down to about 25 minutes, but it was still no match for the Arduino Uno, which was typically 7 to 10 minutes, and you're up and running for no experience. You could be 10 years old, you could be 100 years old. That Arduino Uno had a blinking light within 10 minutes. So kind of a learning experience when I was there at the Officine. But that was a really good time. I got the whole team a bunch of chocolate from a little chocolate shop that I had run into. I met the owner's mother, and she could only say, "Dan from Vegas." That's the only English she spoke. So we got a bunch of chocolate for the team, for the front desk people at the toolbox where the Officine was based, a big giant co-work space. So yeah, that was totally interesting. I got to meet some of the smartest, most interesting and innovative people in the world. Some, certainly not all. I visited academic institutions, MIT, Rutgers, UC Irvine, other schools. Yeah, good times. Not to mention the Intel sites where there were a lot of smart people as well. I would spend a lot of time, non-trivial amounts of time at airports. Fun fact, I never missed a flight. I came pretty close, but I never missed a flight because of me. So I was never late to the airport. I was almost late to the airport at departing Toulouse. I made it, but that was close. I almost missed a flight because of construction on the bridge going from Manhattan to Newark. So I made it to the curb with less than 20 minutes. The sky cap said, "You're going to have to check this at the front if they even let you on the plane." They let me on the plane. So that was close. But I never missed a flight because I never missed a work flight. Once or twice I missed flights for personal travel through this period of time because I was on planes so much. So that was bound to happen, but I never missed a work flight. I did, however, miss a connection I don't know if it was Newark. I think it was JFK. I was supposed to fly into Limerick, but I ended up flying into Dublin and taking a bus to Limerick, but I missed my flight and I had to do some quick calling around to the American Express travel people and all this silliness. And I ended up spending 12 hours in an airport waiting to figure out which flight I could jump on. And the airport only had outlets upstairs at the like ticket counters, the booking, front entrance. They only had outlets so I could plug in my laptop, but they only had chairs to sit and a coffee shop that was open 24 hours downstairs by the baggage claim. So that was fun. So somewhere I have a picture of my Intel laptop resting on those little stands that have the ribbons that you can pull out to make a little turnstile cattle call thing for when you have a line of people. So I have my laptop resting on that, plugged into the wall, trying to get in touch with, how am I going to travel to Ireland and get there 10 hours late or whatever it was. Anyway, so that mostly my travel though was uneventful, which is surprising. I mentioned the jet fuel scenario. That was annoying, but not awful. There were occasions where baggage handling problems led to flight delays, flight crew delays, flight crew not arrived yet. So delay. Got put up in hotels a couple times. One time there was a typhoon. That was not a work trip, but I was going to Maker Faire Shenzhen, and typhoon led me to stay in Singapore for 24 hours. So I stayed on the airport's time, or on the airline's time, at a hotel in Singapore. That was pretty cool. So a lot of time, a lot of interesting people, a lot of airport time, a lot of familiarity with flight crews. I would start to see the same people at different airports. I ran into colleagues at different airports. That's when Foursquare was sort of interesting. Like, oh, I'm at the same airport. Do you want to meet up at a Starbucks or whatever? So that happened a couple times. So yeah, it was generally fun. Definitely more to it than a typical workday. Once again, the work from home or work remotely or the digital nomad thing now, total thumbs up. Absolutely. I was at Maker Faire New York one time, and James Jackson, manager, director of engineering, something, whatever his title was, he said, "Hey, we're having this reality show, and since you have been to all these hackathons, you probably have a pretty good handle on how this works. So do you want to be a part of it? You can be a mentor for all of the teams, just like you're doing now. So you help everyone. We're going to have contractors for each of the teams. There's going to be about 20 teams. So you get like 3 teams per contractor. We're going to have people that can do mechanical and electrical. So we're going to try to help these people work on their projects." We got a bunch of submissions. I want to say they got like 300 submissions. They whittled it down to 75. Then we got to see the 75. This was going through the Mark Burnett production company, Survivor producer. So we were producing this reality show called America's Greatest Makers, which would appear on the TBS, Turner Broadcast, whatever network. So no, you did not see it. So we got the 75. They whittled it down to 20. By the way, one of my favorite things about my role at Intel, a combination of the nature of my job description in general and the strangely hands-off nature of my manager's management style. I didn't have to ask anyone. So they said, "Hey, can you be on this show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I just did it. And then I was literally at the hotel checking in for like the first orientation. So this was going to be the first time the actual contestant teams, the 20 teams of up to 3 people per team, were going to be in the same room with the attorney from the Mark Burnett production company, go through the rules, the whole, and this is true, if you say one word to anyone, you're on the hook for $1 million penalty. So all that's true. I think I can say that now, right? So I'm in line, about to check into this hotel. The person running the Intel side of it comes up to me and says, the production company wanted to keep 24 of the teams instead of 20, so they added 4. And this is purely because they thought they would look good on TV. So they added 4. So we need one more mentor that can do 3 teams. So would you mind taking on 3 teams plus doing all the teams? So I was one of the few employees who was hands-on with our product, the Arduino 101, in my technical role and having been to all the hackathons and working with people on various things. So, of course, I didn't have to ask again. So I said, "Yeah, sure." So now I had 3 teams that I was directly working with. And in particular, they had told me before this, they said one of the teams that we are including, and this is when they thought they were going to be, this is right after they discovered it would be 24, but it was fortuitous, I suppose. They said one of the teams is one person. Now, I don't know if she was in the group of 20 or added to the 24. So this is a solo team. It's one person, and the contestant is under 18. So she's a minor. We would rather have an employee work with her rather than a contractor. I said, "Yeah, sure. No problem." Didn't have to ask anyone. As it happens, her family was living in New Jersey. I'm like, "Oh, that's good. I'm from New Jersey as well. Perfect." So all that worked out. I had the 3 teams. I visited New Jersey. I visited UC Irvine for one of the other teams. And the 3rd team, I think I was not able to go. I was somewhere else. So some other mentors went to help them. My 3rd team didn't need any help from me. They were very capable, so that was fine. So the other 2 teams went to their homes or to the Irvine people had a lab space that they were working on their project. So that was cool. So Intel was making house calls. That was very interesting. We had some time at Tech Shop, which was a maker space, like a subscription maker space in San Francisco. So I believe we had 2 sessions there. A fun fact, they booked probably like a dozen rooms. Everybody got their, we didn't have to room with anyone. So everybody had their own room. So they booked up like all of the top floor of a small hotel that was walking distance from the Tech Shop. It was called the Good Hotel. And my sense of humor being what it was and still is, and the hotel being what it was, we were walking back one time. I was speaking to the person that booked the hotel. And I said, so the good hotel? She said, yeah, I got it because it was near the tech shop. And I said, maybe next time we can get the great hotel. She found that mildly humorous because it was mildly true. So we did the reality show, a lot of time on set. So I think we had 2 different sessions, multiple days on the set in LA, the tech shop, 2 different sessions. I think the whole production took 12 weeks. So traveling various places. In the meantime, hackathons and other normal work. So it was an exciting time, very interesting. It was interesting to see the whole process. It was interesting to meet Shaq. I met a couple people. They were the judges, the process, met Mark Burnett briefly. I met the CEO of Intel in person. This was one of several times. The first time he saw me, he said, oh, you're the Vegas guy. You're the guy from Vegas. So that was my moniker, no matter where I was on the planet. Dan from Vegas. So yeah, fun fact, Brian Krasanich lives in Henderson. So once he departed Intel, which is a story he can tell someday, it made the news. So he lives in Henderson. I have not run into him since we departed Intel, but he's here somewhere. We're connected on LinkedIn, which is as valuable as gum on your shoe. So we're coming to the end. I've made reference to Up in the Air, and I had said to my manager, my eventual manager, is this going to be like Up in the Air? We were having lunch at Lotus of Siam. I knew that name would come to me. Lotus of Siam, not a very Americanized Thai restaurant, if I can say that. Someday I'll talk about Thailand stuff. But I knew great Thai food, and this was Americanized, Western-friendly Thai food. And by the way, the reason that happens in ethnic restaurants, if they serve really true native ethnic food to a Western palate, it might get sent back. So as a restaurant trying to do business, you're going to try to serve your dishes so that people will eat them and not send them back. Too spicy, too rich, too this, not enough that. One of my favorites ever, and this is totally off topic. There's a hair in my soup. Well, it's a lemongrass soup. That's lemongrass. No, it's a hair. Well, that hair, as you call it, is blonde, the color of lemongrass, and every single person working here has black hair. Would you like to explain that? So, good times. Anyway, so Lotus of Siam, I said, is this going to be like Up in the Air? And he said, no, well, yeah, sort of. And indeed it was. I was always traveling, 80%-ish. And so, as I mentioned, my weekends were spent in Vegas, now and then. I was in Vegas a lot, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, most likely. The most common text message or email, the opening contact would be, where are you? I'm in Ireland. I'm in this and that. A colleague of mine, you may have read his name in your travels, in the history, the annals of the iPhone, Andy Grignon, who I had met at Palm. I worked with him at Palm. He was going to be a presenter at Life is Beautiful, and it was right around St. Patty's Day. No, is that true? No, that doesn't sound right. Maybe he was going to be in Vegas for a second. Anyway, so he was going to be in Vegas. I think it was Life is Beautiful, but it could have been somewhere else. And he said, hey, I'm going to be in Vegas. You want to meet up? And I said, I am in Dublin right now. And he said, you win. So yeah, good times. So Up in the Air, indeed. Was I like the Ryan Bingham character from Up in the Air? Sort of. I like to think I was not quite so aloof or maybe even damaged, but I was certainly a solo traveler. I booked my own travel. I had my own workflow. I could literally, in all seriousness, before there were more, well, I used to drive my car to the airport if I was going for weekends. So I'd drive to the airport, park, get my stuff out, walk to the gate. Now I had premier status and all that, so I had, if I was checking a bag now and then, that was pretty quick and all that. So I had it all timed out from the time I left, got in my car, go to the airport, check through security. I could arrive at my gate. And by the way, United at Terminal 3 at Las Vegas, now Harry S. Reid International Airport, my flight was always the farthest walk of any gate, like gate 52 or 53 or something, there were no gates farther away. And I would get there just as they started boarding Group 1. So I didn't even have to stop, and I would board the plane, get down, get my stuff on, get down into my seat. Sometimes business, sometimes an upgrade, whatever. So I was, and the other fun part was that before there were more Lyft, I gave up on Uber a long time ago. Before there were more Lyft drivers near where I was living, it would take 20 minutes to get a Lyft driver. So if I was going international, I would get a Lyft, go to the airport, take 20 minutes. So I used to tell people in all veracity, I could call for the Lyft, then start packing and be ready to go. That's how adept I was at my travel workflow. But as more drivers were becoming available closer to me over the course of my time in Intel, it got to be a little tight. It would be more like 3 or 4 minutes, and I could not do that. One time I did come home, threw some stuff in the laundry, in the washer, did a load of laundry, repacked, took a nap in there somewhere. So I was on the ground for like 4 hours, back to the airport, on the road, so to speak. So it was good times. So not quite as dire or dour as Ryan Bingham. I had things in my apartment. I was jokingly asked more than once if my apartment looked like that with like nothing on the walls. Like, no, I still live there. I'm not a total weirdo. But because I was more and more comfortable with my travel process, as I said, so I was able to spend more time on, like, it didn't faze me at all to be on the road all the time, so to speak, in the air, figuring out what my next flight would be, where I was going to be next week, how I could interrupt this trip to stop off there and do something, and interrupt that to go here, and stop midway to go there, and so on and so on. So all this became second nature and piece of cake. So I was able to spend more time. I can shoot through Dublin on the way back and spend a weekend and hang out there and visit this person and go there and stop. When I was on the East Coast, because I'm from there, I would go to Hackensack and visit this, or go to the museum or whatever, right? So I was able to take advantage, which I think most people try to do when they're traveling for work, try to take advantage of being on the ground. So whenever I was asked if it was like up in the air, I would try to compare it instead to the Ed Bloom character played by Ewan McGregor, and in the younger, that was where most of the movie was. And then his elder, that page, I do. The elder Albert Finney, the elder Ed Bloom. So if you recall, that movie was stories of his travels. And at the time, in the telling or the retelling or recounting of the stories, it always seemed like they were tales of the big fish, of the, that can't possibly be. And of course, once the elder Ed Bloom passes away and there's a celebration of life and so on, the funeral or whatever that was, various characters from throughout the show appear, and in reality, they were not quite right. They were not quite the Siamese twins, I guess, were not really Siamese twins, but they were Thai people that looked the same, but they were not joined, for example. So a lot of the people in the movie, a lot of the characters that he encountered and had stories about were pretty close. They existed, maybe not quite exactly as the tales would tell. And I found that while it appeared to the outside that I was on a up-in-the-air like adventure in my travels, always traveling alone, always on the road. Where are you this time? Are you going to be there next time? Whatever. In fact, I like to think that I was having more of a big fish style adventure, coming across interesting characters, experiencing interesting things, certainly coming away from all these travels with some stories. And I would certainly like to have more stories to come. Fingers crossed. And that is only scratching the surface of my many Intel sponsored, as an Intel employee, travels for the sake of the hackathons and the maker fairs and the innovators and the smart people in general, the cool things. Because of these travels, I became completely and totally comfortable with this adage, which I will leave you with today. Never say no to travel, except if it's on Boeing. But if you have an opportunity, it may seem daunting, like, I have to get my passport. which, by the way, expired. So 10 years ago this month was my trip to Ireland. I had gotten my expedited passport back then. I will renew my passport once again. I don't have any travels planned coming up in the next month or two, but I will renew my passport. Everyone should have the ability to travel, and they should have, if given the opportunity, the desire to take advantage of same and see the sights, see the world, get out there. And so even though I was slightly reticent initially, I would get on a plane yesterday for something similar and as flexible and undefined as the role I had with Intel for my time with them. Although I would never work for Intel again. That's a different story. I always use AMD processors for what that's worth. Anyway, I will leave it there. Thank you again. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. You do not have to buy me a coffee, but I do want to have that centralized out of band, so it's there. Whether or not the Quaggling Sand website is up, whether or not the other websites for my other productions are up, etc., etc. So do check out the links, quagglingsand.com. Once that's up and running, God, I hope I can get that up and running soon. That is where I'll leave it. You can hear my voice really wants to end the show, and this episode has reached that point. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you up in the air with a big fish.